Hey, today in the Woodworking Garage, we're talking about clamps. Now I know it can be a boring subject, but I'll do my best to make it interesting. We're going to be talking about clamps of various sizes, shapes, colors, brands, price points. So stick around. Hey, you know what people say about clamps? Well, I'm not going to say it. Take a look. So I have a variety of clamps that I use in my shop. Some I use a little more, some I use less, and some I think I may not have used at all, but I've collected them all and put them on the table here, and I wanted to talk about them. Hey, let's start right here. This here is a 4-way pressure clamp in which I use for making tabletops. I discovered this when I first started making tabletops, and you know, over a parallel clamp, this is a very budget-friendly alternative, and it's really good. It's very effective. They're budget-friendly and much cheaper than, say, a parallel clamp. Now, pipe clamps can be very useful too. And I used to have a bunch of pipe clamps that I started using when I started building tabletops. But I got rid of those and bought the 4-way pressure clamp, and I like it much better. However, I still have one pipe clamp in my shop, and it's mostly used for attaching breadboard ends. And that's why it's a 10-foot long pipe. Now, if you're thinking about buying some of these pipe clamps, they typically come in 2 sizes. You can get them in 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch. And when you buy them, you're only buying the end hardware, and you still have to buy the pipe separately. And you can get it at any home center. So just pay attention to whether or not you're getting the 1/2 inch clamp or the 3/4 inch clamp, and then buy the appropriate length of pipe. Now, these are great for glue ups, and you can buy these at the home center or you can buy them online. But here's a caution for you. There's a lot of brands being sold online that have a very narrow foot down here on the bottom. And what happens when you're trying to use that pipe clamp and you're trying to set your boards up here for glue up, these things like to fall over because the footing on the bottom is real narrow, and it can be very aggravating. I had some of those and I got rid of them. When I bought this new pipe clamp recently, I made sure I found a clamp that had a very wide stance here for a footing, and it works very well. It's very stable, and it doesn't want to flop over when I'm trying to set up my boards for a glue up. This is a Bessey brand clamp, and it was only about $2 more than some of the cheaper ones that I had found online. And I also recommend a pipe clamp that has a nice rubber pad on both ends so that you're not damaging your wood. Now, sometimes when I needed to clamp a large item and I didn't have a clamp that would fit, I would simply use a cargo strap, and they work pretty well too, especially for boxes. When you're doing a glue up on a box and you can put the strap all the way around it in order to get a nice tight squeeze all the way around, and you know, a simple cargo strap works great as a clamp. One of the most popular clamps in my shop would be the Kreg face clamp, what I use for building projects. They're great for clamping 2 project pieces together to ensure that they're nice and flat before drilling in your pocket holes. One of the great features about this face clamp from Kreg is that it's got an auto adjusting feature, and that it allows you to clamp down. Oh yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. There you go. It allows you to clamp down on material of various thicknesses. I'll tell you, these Kreg clamps are junk. Material of various thicknesses. Okay. Armor Tool has a similar clamp in which it has an auto adjust feature, and it allows you to clamp material of various thicknesses without having to, do the twisty knob down here on the end and adjust the clamp. It's actually very effective. They're pretty nice to have because it allows you to grab a clamp quickly and just clamp something down and keep on going. Now the Kreg Clamp is the clamps that I started out with, and they actually work quite well for a long time. But one of the problems that they had is the piston down here inside the clamp would jam up a lot, and then as you saw, sometimes you can't close it until you manipulate the little piston down below or monkey with the adjustment knob to get it to on-jam, and then it would work just fine. I haven't had these armor clamps very long, but so far they've been working out very well for me. So it's a different design, and I'm hopeful that this is a clamp that's going to last a long time and work the way it should. Now Kreg does make this 90-degree clamp, and Armor doesn't make one yet, but I'm told that there will be one coming out soon. But it's a very useful clamp, and again, this one works fairly well most of the time. Again, occasionally it gets jammed up down here, and this little piston, you just have to push down on it and monkey with it a little bit, adjust the knob, the tensioning knob, in order to get it to clamp correctly. It's mostly used for clamping your workpieces that have pocket holes drilled into them. You can set your workpiece together, put this end of your clamp down inside one of the holes, and then clamp down on your workpiece to hold it in place while you're putting a pocket screw into the other hole. What often happens when you're trying to put pocket screws into holes that are drilled at a little bit of an angle is that the wood will tend to want to shift and slide a little bit, and it's really hard to keep it straight. Whereas this clamp right here keeps everything clamped down nice and tight, and it'll remain wherever you have it clamped. Now the one downside about using the face clamps or this 90-degree, or what I like to call the pocket hole clamp, is that the technology that goes into them is kind of expensive, and you're going to spend about $30 or so for each type of clamp, and so that would be the downside. Now my new friend over at 4321 Woodworking did a video recently on this clamp right here, and I saw his video and said, hey, I'm going to have to check that out, and so I purchased one. I'm going to put a link to his video up here and also down in the description below, so you can go check out his channel. Now this is a very innovative clamp in that it is a face clamp, but if you unscrew these two little thumb screws right here, you can actually rotate this around. Now it does require you to put the thumb screws back, so it's a little cumbersome to use. But how about that? Basically it's a 2-in-1 clamp. Now this is made over in you-know-where, and so, it's not the greatest. Now it's kind of innovative in that it allows you to rotate this around. It's not very effective for using it as a pocket hole clamp because I don't think it was designed for that. I'm thinking it was designed for maybe welding or some metal work. I'm not real sure. But this piece here is far too long. The clamp doesn't open up wide enough in order for you to actually get it into a pocket hole like I just demonstrated with the Kreg. But the whole concept and idea behind it is actually pretty awesome. I would really like to see one of these other companies that has the auto-adjusting, that offers auto-adjusting clamps come out with a similar device in which you could rotate and or maybe have an interchangeable part here where you could take off a face clamp and put on a 90-degree clamp or a pocket hole clamp. So for the price that you're paying for buying two other clamps, I'd be willing to pay just a little bit more even in order to get a clamp that was dual purpose like this. Especially if it was an auto-adjusting like the Kreg and the Armor tool that offers. So hey, tell me down in the description what you think. Is this something that you'd purchase for your shop if it had a dual purpose? I mean, I think it's a great idea, so let me know what you think. Another small face clamp that gets used a lot in my shop is this small little 5-inch clamp from Kreg, and For those of you who've seen my videos, I used to have the Kreg K4 pocket hole jig, and this was great because I could just quickly clamp the pocket hole jig down to the edge of my workbench, and that's mostly what I used it for. I don't use that jig anymore, and so I'm not sure if I'll be using this clamp very often. Now, if you like buying budget-friendly tools, you probably have a couple of these budget-friendly twisty clamps, as I like to call them. Some people call them the bar clamp or F-style clamp. I like calling them the twisty clamp because, well, you got to do the old twisty thing. They're very budget-friendly. You can get a 6-inch style clamp like this for $3. You just can't find a cheaper clamp. Now, a lot of people don't like these clamps because they're cheap. But I got to tell you what, none of these clamps have broken with me. Occasionally I'll have a tip that falls off the end or something, but that's been it. Like it just did. They actually work very well, and a lot of people just love them. But here's something very important that you need to know. If you have purchased these clamps or even looked at them, have you noticed that there are now clamps that look exactly the same, only one's a little more blue and one's kind of a darker black color or dark gray? Did you know that there is actually a big difference in the two clamps? Let me show you. Now first, let me show you that these are both made by Pittsburgh. They're both sold at Harbor Freight. They're both the same price, and in fact they both have the same model number, 96210 and 96210. So they're sold under the same item number, but there's a couple of important differences that you should know about. The first being this little part of the clamp here that swivels back and forth. These are made a little bit different. This one here is straight, whereas this one here is a little more cone shaped. And that's kind of important because if you're opening these up all the way like this little piece will hit the bottom of the bottom part of this little bracket here, and it won't always sit straight. When it tightened up nice and tight, it was kind of crooked. It's made to swivel back and forth, which is a good feature. I like that. But this one over here, which is the blue handled one, it's shaped a little bit differently, so when you tighten it up, it actually seats down inside the hole, so it keeps this nice and flat and straight. So that's just one minor thing about the clamp. The next important thing you need to know about this clamp is that the threads on the twisty handle are completely different. On this one over here, on the dark handled one over here, it can take up to 21 rotations to fully close this gap right here. I counted 22. But on this blue handled one over here, it's only 9. So 9.5 rotations to get this to close up versus 21 rotations to get this one to close up. They're the same size clamp. Everything else about them is pretty much the same. Now, another popular clamp from Harbor Freight is the trigger clamp, or the squeeze clamp is what I like to call it. Now, it's equally good quality. I haven't had any of these break, but these clamps serve a completely different purpose. With a trigger style clamp like this, you can't get as much clamping pressure on two different workpieces if you're trying to hold something down, because you're sitting here trying to squeeze this, and it's just not the same kind of pressure. As with a twisty clamp, you can get a lot of pressure on those. So I mostly use these as like a third set of hands when I'm working on something and I need to hold something in place slightly while it's being glued up that doesn't require a lot of pressure. That's where these clamps are perfect. They're also very cheap. This 12-inch clamp here, I think was like $4.99, maybe $5.99. I really like them for these pads that are right here on the ends. This is a thick rubber pad, and it allows you to really kind of get a good grip on your workpiece. Whereas some similar style clamps that are much more expensive, they've got a really thin rubber coating piece here that doesn't offer much help or support at all. And I've even seen some that were just a hard plastic between here, which doesn't allow you to really grip your workpiece at all, and you can wiggle and slide it right off your workpiece. Whereas having this nice rubber pieces here that are kind of thick Really allows you to grip down on your workpiece. And that's one of the big benefits of these Harbor Freight clamps. Some people call them cheap. I call them affordable. Now when I first started out, I did go out and buy some of the blue and yellow clamps that are quite popular at the home center. And these are handy. They work pretty well. I have lost some of the pads on here, and this is one of those hard plastic pads I was just telling you about. I would much rather have a nice rubber piece on the end of my clamp here when I'm putting it up against my workpiece rather than a hard plastic piece. And of course this one has fallen off over time. Now this clamp operates just a little bit better. I mean, it's rather large handle, so if you have smaller hands, you're not going to enjoy it as much. I've got large hands and it still seems a little big for me. But I do like the release trigger, which is right here. Makes it real nice and easy. When you clamp down, if you want to release it, you just pinch it and it allows you to open it right back up. Whereas, this is the downfall of the Harbor Freight clamp. Its release mechanism is just this little thumb trigger piece right here. And when you have a lot of pressure on this clamp, trying to push down on this to break it loose so that you can slide it backwards, it's a little difficult. So that's one of the downsides of the Harbor Freight clamps. But you know, it still works just fine. Now I like using spring clamps in my shop, and one of the reasons is to hold plastic up when I'm hanging plastic around my shop to create a paint booth, and I'll put a link right up here for that one. They're only 99 cents at the home center. They're actually very tight. There's quite a bit of pressure on that clamp right there. It's got these little rubber tips on the end that helps protect your workpiece, and they work well. Now I saw a video once where someone took one of those same spring clamps and they turned it into an edge clamp by putting a bicycle inner tube piece over the end of the clamp, and that I thought was a great idea. So I spent a lot of time trying to find the inner tube that was going to fit, and then I cut it up into pieces and forced each end onto the end of my clamp here, and it worked great for a short time. What happened is the end of the spring clamp is just a little too sharp of an edge, and after just a couple of uses, as you can see, the rubber tire piece just kind of pulled through, and although it's still effective, it leaves a really sharp edge here now that can damage your workpiece if you're clamping down on it. So it works, and it's a quick way to make a cheap edge clamp, but I really need to buy some real edge clamps and get rid of these gimmicky ones that are broken. Now this next clamp really isn't really a clamp, but it acts like a clamp, and this is a new tool from Armor Tool Company, and they sent me one of these. They sent me a couple of these to test out recently, and I gotta tell you, for a pair of pliers that auto adjust, these have actually turned out to be quite handy. I've already used them several times. In fact, I have a couple of smaller ones that they sent that my wife has already claimed because she does a lot of crafting projects and she has a crafting room, and she said, man, these fit my hands and this is perfect, and so, well, they're no longer in my shop. But let me show you how well these work. Now, I wouldn't necessarily advise you to use these on a woodworking project because, of course, it is a pair of pliers and it has some sharp teeth here. But what's nice is it's self-adjusting. And to release it, it's got this nice big release handle right here that you just pull back on. Actually, you can grab it with your pinky, pull back on it, and it opens it right up. And then you can move on to another piece of material that's a different thickness and quickly clamp down on it. Or here's a piece that's even thicker and clamp down on that. And it's a great tool they developed there, and it works well. The clamping mechanism seems to be working just fine. I've used it several times now, like I said, and you know, it's turned out to be quite handy around the shop, but not necessarily for gripping your woodworking pieces because, again, it's got these sharp teeth. But technically it acts as a clamp, and so I wanted to include it on this video. Now, Masca Tool Company, you probably saw that video recently of their pocket hole jig that I did. They heard that I was going to be doing this clamp video, so they sent me a couple clamps too. And these are some brand new clamps for them, and I haven't quite seen anything like it before. It's kind of innovative, and I don't know, maybe you've seen something like this. If so, let me know down in the description below if you've even heard of or seen anything like this. But this is called a lever clamp. And it's a lot similar to the F-style clamps that I just showed you. You know, it's got these nice thick rubber pads on both ends that I really like. It easily slides upon the bar. But to clamp it down, you simply have this lever right here that you squeeze one time. And that's it. That's all you do. Now the clamping distance is pretty short because of that. I haven't measured it, but I'd say maybe a ½ an inch or so. But it works very well. Let me show you. So let's say we just needed to clamp down in this workpiece here. You would want to go ahead and slide it closed as much as it'll go, but then just squeeze the clamp. And it's there. I mean, that's not going anywhere. That's a nice tight grip. To release it, you just push on this release lever right here. You just grab it with your thumb even, and it snaps loose. And now this is their 6-inch version, and they do have other sizes. But I got to tell you, I think it has real purpose in the woodworking shop, especially with these really nice rubbery grip pads here. It's nice, not unlike the squeeze clamp where you have to squeeze it several times in order to kind of get it tightened up. With this one, it allows you just to grab this thing right here and give it a nice tight squeeze, and you're golden. You have to check their product page, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe this was something like 450 pounds of pressure that it can handle. So it's a well-made device, and it seems to be of really good quality so far. So it's definitely got a place in my shop. Now don't get it confused with this other clamp that Masca just came out with. And this is called a gear clamp. And it operates much the same way, in which it slides easily upon the bar and you squeeze the trigger to lock it down. However, the big difference here is you only have a rubber pad. You only have a rubber pad on one side. This other side over here is just all metal. Now I tested it out on a piece of pine, and it grips pretty good. This tends to want to slip just a little bit, and more importantly, on a soft wood like a piece of pine, it does tend to want to leave a small indentation in your wood, which isn't very good for a woodworking project. But if you're doing metal works and some other type of work, you know, this is also it's a very good clamp. It's a slightly different clamping mechanism in here, so the whole thing is designed just a little bit different. But it functions the same way. You tighten it up upon your workpiece or whatever it is you're clamping, and you squeeze the trigger down to where it's nice and tight. It's got a slightly different trigger release here. But again, like I said, it functions the same way, other than you do have this metal pad here instead of a nice rubber pad. So there's going to be links down in the description for these as well. I encourage you to go check them out. Now here's a type of hold down clamp. It came with my miter saw. It attaches to the back of my miter saw, and basically it allows you to put a workpiece on your miter saw and kind of hold it down a little bit before you start cutting. And I've never really used it for that. I haven't had a need for it, but it is a clamp and it's in my shop, and so I wanted to show it, but I just don't have any use for it. Here's another clamp that came from another tool, and you're probably a little familiar with these, right? All of our old pocket hole jigs were made this way with this push style type clamp. And this one actually came off of the Masca pocket hole jig that I now have in my shop. But, you know, I'm not a fan of this when I can have this. Now this is another one of those clamps from Armor Tool, and just as a reminder, they don't sponsor my video, they don't sponsor my channel, but they do have some good quality tools. They've sent me some things and I really like them, so I wanted to talk about them. They have this clamp upgrade kit that fits on the Masca pocket hole jig. It also fits on the Kreg K4 and the Win and some of the other budget-friendly pocket hole jigs. It's got the same hole pattern, and they send you everything you need in order to just swap out that clamp. And so that's where this clamp came from, and I'm sure I can reuse this for something in my shop. I just haven't come up with a need for it. If you have any suggestions on what I could use this for, please let me know. I'd like to put it to use. Now I have a couple of these hold down clamps that are made for T-tracks. You can just pop it into a T-track and clamp down on it and hold a workpiece. I bought some of these because I made a a tapering jig for my table saw. It wasn't a very good build, and it didn't last too long. And well, eventually I ended up buying this tapering jig from Rockler. It's got the same style clamp on it, but it's really good because it allows you to adjust it because it's got the same T-bolt on the bottom. You can adjust this up at different heights and then clamp down on a board that you plan on sending through your table saw to cut at an angle. So that style of clamp works very well. It's pretty specific in how it can be used. A similar hold down clamp is this little guy right here. I found these online and I found them to be very useful. In fact, I use one over at my miter station. I have this one over here right near my miter station because I can use a scrap piece of wood and set it up here and clamp it down and use it as a stop block for my miter saw. It's pretty handy to have, and it operates well. It holds nicely. And because it has these 4 mounting holes, you can pretty much mount it anywhere. Now here's a little clamp I found at the home center, and it's mostly used for holding cables and wires together, but it works very well. I recently had a company from, well, you know where, reach out to me, and they wanted to send me this corner clamp to test out and review. And I started making a video on it, and I'll stick it right up here and just let you look. Some sheet goes together, maybe you're making a cabinet or something like that. Then the process is you need to kind of hold this into place, get your wood lined up, kind of put this up here, hold it into place like this. And then you're going to want to slip this in the hole and tighten it down. If you need to make an adjustment over here, for instance, the boards aren't lining up back here, and I need to slide this board over a little bit, and it's clamped in there pretty good. To loosen this up, you got to be careful because then things start just falling apart on you. And now the material, it's a good quality device. I checked it for square, and it is at 90 degrees, so it's good for that. But that you just saw, it's cumbersome to use because these little guys they fall out, and they're designed that you just stick them down in this hole, and then you've got this metal piece right here that you can use to tighten down on, and it's designed for you to use 4 different, 2 clamps on either side, and well, it's just hard to use because these things just keep falling out. Now here's a corner clamp that does work pretty well, and again, I'll show you the video right here. It's made by Kreg Tool Company. If you're familiar with Kreg's clamps, you know it has this auto-adjusting Automax feature here where it self-adjusts according to the board thickness that you're using. You just take your wood pieces, open up the jaws, slip it on, and tighten it down. This was not set up, okay? This is just how it is. Like I said, it's made by Kreg Tool Company. It works well when it works, but again, it's the same clamping mechanism down here, the auto adjusting that they have. It works sometimes, and sometimes it just doesn't work at all. Hey, that's 2 fails by Kreg Tool Company. That's 2 clamp fails by Kreg Tool Company. Let me know in the description if you have their clamps and if you're having some problems with them. When I first got these, they seemed to work great. I never used this one much, but the few times that I have used it, it worked okay, but it seems like here recently, whenever I grabbed it, it locks, and here it is, it's locked again. Just does not want to open up. Now here's a couple more clamps. We've all seen hose clamps. You may use them for your dust collection system or something. The problem with these is, you got this little common head screw here. You got a twisty to open and close, and it's kind of cumbersome. I recently purchased these. They're a little bit better. It's got this little thumb screw right here, and it allows you to at least do it manually by hand to open and close. It does take a lot of rotations to open and close this clamp, but it's a little better than working with a common screwdriver. Similarly, I like using these little hose clamps that you just simply pinch and it opens and closes. I primarily use those on the end of my dust collection hose. It allows me to squeeze it and adjust it up and down. And when I attach my hose to some of the tools that I use here in the shop, I can quickly adjust it and it clamps down in the hose and kind of holds it in place. And so that works pretty well. Now here's a corner clamp that I do like. I don't use it much. In fact, if you saw my video on tools that I wasted money on, I believe this was on there. Basically, I haven't had a need for it much. But if I did, this actually would work very well. It allows you to take two pieces of wood and you can go up to 1.5 inches thick and as little as a ½ inch, like a ½ inch sheet of plywood. But you can put it in two pieces of wood like this and then clamp it down. And the result is you get a nice 90-degree turn, a nice 90 degrees. However, one of the problems I've found with this is, just as you see right here, sometimes when it clamps down, especially on wider boards, you end up getting a little bit of a gap. Now lastly, there's two clamps I want to talk about that are new to my shop. And again, if you recognize the color, this is an Armor Tool device. But they sent me these dog clamps recently, and in fact, they also sent me this real nice table over here. I'll show you in a moment. But these dog clamps are great because it's the same style of clamp that I've used on my pocket hole jigs now. Only it comes with this peg, not that that's the technical name for it. I'm not sure what you call this part of the clamp, but it drops down inside your dog hole on your table and allows you to clamp work pieces. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let's say we needed to assemble something, or maybe we're just simply working with a piece of wood. Maybe you're going to do some hand planing on it and you need a way to clamp it down. This little dog fence is perfect for that. You put a dog fence on one side, you can put your wood there and then use this dog clamp to simply clamp down on it, and it's sturdy, it's nice and tight, and it's not going anywhere. Now you don't have to have a special table to use this clamp. In fact, all you need to do is drill a 3/4 inch hole in your workbench, and then this will drop right down inside that hole. It's great because you can rotate it 360 degrees and get it from different angles. Now a similar but different clamp is the auto adjust horizontal dog clamp, in which it has this much longer peg here that drops down inside your hole, and it allows you to clamp down on work pieces of various thicknesses. Hey, I don't know about you, but I'm a little tired of talking about clamps. It's taken me almost 2.5 hours to film this video. By the time I get it edited, I'm hoping to have it down to about 20 minutes or so, but look right down there, but hey, whatever it turns out to be, it turns out to be. I hope you've seen value in some of these clamps that I described to you today, and I'm going to try to have as many links to these clamps down in the description below in case there's anything that you see that you're interested in. You can go ahead and click on those and go check out pricing and more information about it. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments below, and I'll try to get to those as soon as I can. And right over here, I'm going to go ahead and throw up a couple other videos that you might be interested in. And if you go ahead and click on those, I'll see you on the other side. Hey, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.